Hello there, I'm Father Diego, and this is the message of the Gospel for today, March the 24th, Tuesday, March the 24th. We listen from the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verses 1 to 16. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, there was in Jerusalem at the sheep gate a pool called in Hebrew Bethesda, with 5 porticos. In these lay a large number of ill, blind, lame, and crippled. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him laying there and knew that he had been ill for a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. While I'm on my way, someone else gets down there before me." Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your mat and walk." Immediately the man became well, took up his mat and walked. Now that day was a Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who was cured, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to carry your mat." Jesus answered them, "The man who made me well told me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who told you, 'Take it up and walk'?" The man who has healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away, since there was a crowd there. After this, Jesus found him in the temple area and said to him, "Look, you are well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse may happen to you." The man went and told the Jews that Jesus was the one who made him well. Therefore, the Jews began to persecute Jesus because he did this on a Sabbath. A very interesting chapter, this chapter 5. We are not going to read the entire chapter because tomorrow we will celebrate another important solemnity, an important feast. So we're going to miss a section in this gospel, an important section in this gospel. But anyway, we have the story of a healing. And the circumstances are well described with many details. The place, the age of this guy, and the circumstances, and so on, right? But in the middle of this passage, we have a piece of information that we cannot leave unnoticed, right? In verse 9. Now that day was a Sabbath. Why this does matter? Why this piece of information is so important? Because the discussion of working on a Sabbath day is, if you want, the central theme of this gospel, of this chapter. So the law of the Sabbath is such an important institution in the Jewish culture at that time and nowadays, because the precept of Sabbath brings, if you want, stability and balance to social life and to society as well. So there are strict rules and regulations to observe properly this celebration, the celebration of the Sabbath. How many miles you can walk, what to do, what not to do, what type of task you can do, and so on and so on. So that's why the Jews are so scandalized, because Jesus is breaking such an important law, the law of Sabbath. But in Jesus' mind, there is something different, because Jesus is doing what his Father, as he said later on, verse 17, that we do not read today. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is at work until now, so I am at work." That's, if you want, the breaking point of this chapter. So in Jesus' mind, the work of God is the work of liberation, is the work of freedom, is the work of restoration of human dignity. And above that, there is no law. There is nothing more important than that, than to recover human dignity, to give back the dignity and the identity and the restoration to every human being. So in order to understand the discussion related to the Sabbath law and the relationship between Jesus and this particular law or this particular celebration, we have to understand the relationship between Jesus and God. As he will state later on in the verses that we are not going to read today, we will find that Jesus describes himself as the Son of God. And as the Son of God, he does what the Father does. Again, the work of liberation and restoration of human dignity. So, my question, or a kind of question that comes up from this gospel. If Jesus is doing the work of his Father because he sees what his Father does, what do the disciples of Jesus do if we see what Jesus is doing? How you doing this time of quarantine? The state of Massachusetts is moving along with this. Now we have this kind of preventive quarantine. Is not a lockdown like in New York or California, but we are moving toward them. So good thing that we can do to have a productive, if you want, time of isolation and staying in is to make a schedule. Try to make a schedule of different activities that you can do every day. In that way, you might not go crazy. Coffee. And have a wonderful day, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow with the message of the gospel. Bye-bye.